Hello, fifth grade. It's Monday, the 11th of May, and this is our history time. We're looking at pages 204 to 209, Comp Check 17A. Very important chapter. Chapter 17 is about the world wars, World War I and World War II. What caused them, what happened between them, how they ended up, and how they've affected our lives to this day. Okay, so very important. My father fought in World War II, and so we're going to talk about that. All right, so we're on page 204, the World Wars. It says, World War I. Civilization had progressed so far by 1900 that many people thought the world could only get better and better. Little did they realize that in Europe, the stage was being set for the two greatest wars the world had ever known, World War I, which was from 1914 to 1918, and World War II from 1939 to 1945. Both wars began with events in Germany. Many German people had rejected the Bible and embraced the teachings of modernist preachers who said that Jesus is not God, that the Bible is not always true, and that a person's conscience should be his only guide, meaning what a person thinks. Without the true guide of the Bible, the Germans were in great danger of making unwise decisions. So that's a formula for disaster. Number one, Jesus is not God. The Bible is not completely true. And just go with what you think is true. And I've told you that in America, there's a lot of people who believe that. I warned you that in colleges and in public schools, you're going to learn this kind of nonsense, okay? That the Bible is just another book and that Jesus was just a nice guy, just a man. And we know those things, that the Bible is actually alive, that it is a book full of the only truth in all the world, and that Jesus is God himself. And so Germany had rejected that. So you're going to see that both World War I and World War II began with the Germans. So it's not that the Germans are horrible people. Jesus loves them. But they rejected God. They rejected his word. And that is going to open you up for the devil to be able to use them to actually bring about wars. So the world prepares for war. Kaiser Wilhelm II was the ruler of Germany in 1914. He wanted Germany to control more land. Although England had the greatest navy in the world, the German ruler wanted to gain control of the seas. With this in mind, he began building up Germany's army and navy. Other countries became fearful and decided to form alliances against Germany. An alliance is a promise between two or more countries to fight together against their enemies in time of war. These countries that sided against Germany were called the Allied powers or the Allies. Countries that sided with Germany were called the Central Powers. The few countries that decided not to take either side were called neutral nations. They were in the middle. European countries were preparing themselves for war. The only thing that lacked was an excuse to begin a war. The excuse came on June 28th, 1914. So we see, first of all, that Kaiser Wilhelm II, the German ruler at that time, wanted Germany to control more land, wanted to go in and invade other countries and take their land. Never okay. England had the greatest navy and the greatest in the world, it says. And the Germans wanted to control the seas. Okay, and so they have to get England out of the way in order to do that. No one controls the seas except for God. Think about that. Okay, and so with this in mind, it says they began building up Germany's army and navy to get England out of the way so they can go through the seas to invade these other countries. Think about what's in the heart of this leader. All right. And so other countries became fearful. They heard that Germany's building up this navy, that Germany wants to get more land, and so they become fearful. How do a weaker, lesser country defend themselves against a power like this? And so some countries got together and said, hey, basically, if Germany comes after us, will you join us and help us defend our nation? And they created an alliance. And it says that alliance is a promise between two or more countries to defend each other, to help each other in times of war. So the alliances were countries that sided against Germany. The countries that sided with Germany were called Central Powers. So we have the Allied powers and the Central Powers. So it says it's almost like European countries were in a standoff. Some sided against Germany, the Allied powers, some sided with Germany, the Central Powers. They're just waiting for an excuse, poised and ready to attack. Archduke, so here's their excuse. It came on June 28, 1914. Archduke Francis Ferdinand would one day rule over the country of Austria-Hungary. One day, he and his wife were visiting the small country of Bosnia that Austria-Hungary controlled. So Austria-Hungary had controlled a smaller country known as Bosnia. Okay? The control of Bosnia was causing much ill will between Austria-Hungary and the small country of Serbia, which also wanted to influence Bosnia. So poor Bosnia. You have Austria-Hungary and you have Serbia, and Austria-Hungary are at odds because they both want to control Bosnia. Okay? What about Bosnia? What about their rights? And so there's a lot of ill will between Austria-Hungary and Serbia because they're both trying to control Bosnia. So as the Archduke, who is the leader of Austria-Hungary, and his wife rode in an open car, a Serbian teenager shot them to death. So you see here in the picture, you have the Archduke and his wife. You have the teenager right here in the forefront, a gun in his hand. He shot and he kills. Now this is a Serbian teenager. Remember, the Serbians had ill will against the Austria-Hungarians because they wanted to control Bosnia also. And so this teenager, this kid, decided to kill the Archduke and his wife of Austria-Hungary. And that created the excuse to begin the war. So Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia, not just a teenager, for the assassination. They blamed every Serbian for what this one kid did. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, eager for an excuse to begin war, promised to help if Austria-Hungary went to war against Serbia. He's just waiting to take over more land in the world. I don't know that he cared anything about Austria-Hungary. It was just a way for him to start a war. So we see what's in his heart. Soon Austria-Hungary did declare war. Meanwhile, Russia promised to help Serbia. This act angered the Germans, who then declared war on Russia. Remember, they're all going to promise, if you go to war, we'll back you up. If you go to war, we'll back you up. They're all falling like dominoes. So here we go. Austria-Hungary goes to war against Serbia. Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II says, hey, Austria-Hungary, you go to war, we'll join you. Okay? And Russia said to Serbia, hey, you go to war against Austria-Hungary and Germany, who's joined them, we will back you up. Okay? And then it says this... So meanwhile, Russia promised to help Serbia. This act angered the Germans, who then declared war on Russia. Because France had promised to help Russia, Germany declared war on France too. One by one, the countries of Europe declared war on one another. Soon England declared war on Germany. One Englishman said, quote, the lamps are going out all over Europe, end quote. Indeed, gloomy days were ahead. So that's not literally talking about a lamp. Okay, it's saying that the light in these countries, one by one, they're falling into war. Dark, gloomy days are ahead. So that statement made by this Englishman was a very true statement. Here we are in America. We're on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Here's America. Here's Europe. Okay, we're over here. Will what's happening over here on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean affect us? Let's find out. For the first 3 years of the war, President Woodrow Wilson kept America neutral, not going to get involved. Most Americans agreed that the United States should stay out of the war. German U-boats, Germany's powerful army marched into and defeated several European countries. Because England is an island, Germany could not use its army to defeat her. Instead, Kaiser Wilhelm II planned to destroy ships bringing food and supplies to England in order to starve the people of England into giving up. With this plan in mind, the Germans began to use U-boats. These underwater boats, or submarines, moved unseen through the water and fired torpedoes at enemy ships that could be carrying food or supplies to England. Okay, so here's President Woodrow Wilson, a picture of him. And here are the U-boats, first kind of submarines. It says here, during World War I, the Germans used U-boats to destroy any ships that might be carrying food or supplies to England. So they're trying to starve England out. They're trying to cut off support that England could get while they're at war with her. The sinking of the Lusitania. In May 1915, an English passenger liner, the Lusitania, left New York. New York is in America. As it neared England, a German U-boat fired a torpedo into the side of the Lusitania without any warning. The ship sank quickly. Over 1,000 men, women, and children lost their lives, including over 100 Americans. Okay, so this is a passenger ship. This is not a warship. This is not a supply ship trying to get to England. Okay, and Germany sunk it. Because remember, they wanted to control the seas. They sunk a ship full of men, women, and children who were just traveling from New York, leaving America, to go to England. And over 100, it says, people were Americans. Okay? Now, America is involved. Are people, innocent Americans who were just traveling from New York to London, just like when any of us goes on vacation, now they have been killed by Germans intentionally. What are we going to do? The American people became very angry. But though there was talk of war, the United States decided to stay neutral. Look at the next title. It says the United States enters the war. What must have happened? After a time of calm, the German government announced that beginning on February 1st, 1917, it would follow a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. German submarines, think about this, would sink without warning all ships entering the waters around the British Isles. Americans were enraged at this renewed threat to innocent human lives. Not just warships, not just supply ships that are trying to help England, but all ships. Unrestricted, meaning there's no restriction. There's no rules. There's no exceptions. You get in water, we will sink you. Okay? Then in March of 1917, British agents discovered a German letter asking Mexico to enter the war on the German side. This letter, called the Zimmermann Note, promised to give Mexico land from the states, American states of New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona in return for help with the war. They have no right to say that Mexico, if you join us, we will give you New Mexico, we will give you Texas, and we will give you Arizona. It is not theirs to give. These are American states. In other words, Germany was promising Mexico part of the United States if Germany won the war. And we know that Mexico is right below America. Okay, so they are our southern border. Although Mexico did not help Germany, that's good, you can imagine how angry Americans became at Germany's threat to divide the United States. The German ruler would stop at nothing. If he won in Europe, he would go after America. Our country was being threatened. We had no choice but to enter the war. In April 1917, the United States joined the Allies and declared war on Germany. President Wilson read a war message in which he said, the world must be made safe for democracy, quote unquote. The world must remain safe for democracy. And we know that democracy is another word for freedom. okay, where people choose their leaders. So pretty crazy. Not the German people. This was their leadership. These were some of their politicians, literally promising Mexico, if they join them, we will give you 3 American states: New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. Not theirs to give. In France, people cheered the American soldiers as French bands played the Star-Spangled Banner. That's their national anthem. The arrival of American troops gave new hope to the allies of Europe. The German army that had begun to weaken now faced a fresh army. Which army was that? The American army. So they've been fighting this war for a while, and now we have entered. This is 1917. Okay, so they've been fighting for I think I don't want to misquote, for several years. 2-3 years now at least they've been fighting. And so our army hasn't. The Americans haven't been involved. And so our army comes in fresh, strong, and gives the Allied powers the push that they need to get to that finish line. Okay? Each day, both sides lost hundreds of men who believed that their country was worth dying for. Finally, on November 11th, 1918, the Central Powers surrendered and World War I ended. Central Powers, those countries that sided with Germany, were defeated by the Allied powers. Those countries that were on the opposite side, that fought against Germany. Today, we know November 11th is celebrated as Veterans Day, honoring all those who have served in our armed forces. So we see in our pictures here, it says, for the first time in history, battles took place in the air as a recently invented airplane became a deadly weapon of war. So we see our first airplane battles. And then here, parades and celebrations were held in many cities when the war ended. And you could see where it says in the newspaper headlines that Germany surrendered. You see some people holding their newspapers. So there was great celebration that took place. The League of Nations, page 209. When the United States entered World War I, President Wilson said that the world must be made safe for democracy. With that goal in mind, Wilson suggested that a League of Nations be formed following the war. In this plan, all the countries who had joined the League of Nations would promise not to make war on any other nation that was a member of the League. And so, a League of Nations was formed with headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. Although 60 countries joined the League, the United States did not. Even though our president, it was his idea, Woodrow Wilson, they did not want to join the war. This League. Let's find out why. Americans were afraid that joining the League of Nations would involve the United States in other European wars rather than keeping us out of war. They were also afraid that we would not have as much say in decisions about our country's involvement in world affairs. President Wilson was disappointed that his own country did not join the League. The people of the United States were happy that the war was over. Our country had provided the added strength, like I said, that the Allies needed to win the war. The Americans who had fought in Europe came home to their families, and Americans did their best to forget about war. Okay, so again, the League of Nations was the idea that all countries who joined this league promised that they would never fight any nation that was a member of the league, okay? And that they would protect each other. So America, remember, we're on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Here's Europe, here's America. America thought, if any other European nations get in any wars, we don't, want to have to go and fight alongside them. Now, that wasn't being selfish at all. It was, we're here on the other side of, they call it the pond, the Atlantic Ocean. We don't want to get involved in things that we don't agree with or that we don't believe in. And so the Americans were like, some wars that some countries get involved in, like I said, we might not agree with or want to have to be a part of. And so it's better if we kind of just stay where we are, and we can choose who we want to support and how we want to support them, the nations that we want to support and how we want to support them. So that's a very wise decision. A lot to talk about today. Look at our comp check 17A. Number 1 says, who was the president of the United States during World War I? Number 2, what did the Germans use which made them victorious on the seas? Number 3, the discovery of what letter angered Americans and helped them decide to enter World War I. Number 4, who won World War I and when did the fighting stop? So there's 2 questions for number 4. Make sure you write both. And number 5, what was formed after World War I in an effort to keep war from breaking out again? Okay, so we've answered all of those questions. All of those things were highlighted. All right, so do a good job.